At 8,000 feet above Edwards Air Force Base, Lieutenant Amanda "Pixie" Foster had exactly 47 seconds to prove that the men who'd spent months calling her a pretty flight attendant were dead wrong. Her F-16 was spinning out of control, flames trailing from the engine, and 200 people in the grandstands below were about to die unless the woman they dismissed as too delicate for combat could pull off the impossible. Standing 5'3" with blonde hair and a voice that sounded more suited for customer service than combat operations, Amanda Foster looked like she'd stepped out of a commercial airline brochure rather than a fighter pilot's ready room. But behind those blue eyes burned the precision of someone who'd mastered one of the world's most demanding professions while enduring daily humiliation from colleagues who couldn't see past her appearance. What began as relentless harassment of the token female pilot would end with a feat of aviation heroism that would be studied for decades. But this isn't just about proving sexist colleagues wrong. It's about the split-second decision to sacrifice everything for strangers who never knew they needed saving, and the courage to attempt the impossible when everyone else has already given up. Nellis Air Force Base stretches across the Nevada desert like a monument to American air power, its runways shimmering in the desert heat as F-16 Thunderbirds practice the precision maneuvers that have made them legends. The elite demonstration team represents the pinnacle of military aviation, where pilots perform death-defying stunts at air shows across the nation. It's a world of split-second timing, absolute precision, and unforgiving standards where the smallest mistake can mean death. The culture at Nellis is intensely masculine, shaped by decades of tradition and the inherent dangers of supersonic flight. Pilots earn respect through skill, courage, and the ability to handle aircraft that can kill them in an instant. The ready room walls are covered with photographs of legendary aviators, all men, their stories forming the mythology that defines what it means to be a fighter pilot. Amanda Foster grew up in small-town Montana, the daughter of a crop duster pilot who taught her to fly before she could legally drive. Her father, a Vietnam veteran, recognized her natural talent and encouraged her dreams of military aviation despite knowing the challenges she'd face. Amanda excelled academically, earning a degree in aerospace engineering while logging hundreds of flight hours in civilian aircraft. Her current reality at Nellis was a constant battle against both the demands of elite aviation and the additional burden of being the only woman in a traditionally male domain. She lived in base housing, maintaining her aircraft with meticulous care while studying flight manuals late into the night. Her personal life was non-existent. Relationships were impossible when colleagues questioned her every decision and superiors scrutinized her every move. What made Amanda truly exceptional wasn't just her flying ability. Though she consistently outperformed her peers in technical evaluations, her smaller stature, initially seen as a disadvantage, actually provided benefits in high-G maneuvers where larger pilots would lose consciousness. Her analytical mind, honed by engineering training, allowed her to understand aircraft systems at a level that went beyond mere operation to true mastery. The conflict at Nellis went beyond typical military hazing. Amanda's presence challenged fundamental assumptions about who could be a warrior, triggering defensive reactions from pilots who saw her success as a threat to their identity. The harassment wasn't just personal. It represented a broader struggle over the future of military aviation and the definition of what made someone worthy of flying the nation's most advanced aircraft. But Amanda's greatest test wouldn't come from training exercises or performance evaluations. It would come from a moment when mechanical failure and human prejudice collided at 8,000 feet, with hundreds of lives hanging in the balance. The harassment began the moment Amanda arrived at Nellis, when Major Jake "Viper" Thompson, the squadron leader with 15 years of combat experience, made it clear that he considered her presence a political stunt rather than a merit-based assignment. "Foster, you sure you didn't get lost on your way to the commercial terminal?" became his standard greeting, delivered with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never faced consequences for his behavior. The systematic campaign to break her spirit escalated quickly. During briefings, Thompson would interrupt her technical discussions with comments about her pretty nails being too delicate for the stick. Other pilots followed his lead, leaving flight attendant uniforms in her gear bag and making jokes about her appearance during mission planning sessions. The message was clear: she didn't belong in their world, and they would make her life miserable until she quit. Amanda's response to the harassment revealed both her strategic thinking and her unshakable determination. Instead of filing complaints that would likely be dismissed or escalate the situation, she chose to respond through performance. Every flight became an opportunity to prove her worth. Every maneuver a chance to demonstrate that skill had nothing to do with gender or appearance. Her preparation went beyond standard training requirements. Amanda studied aircraft systems with the intensity of someone whose life depended on understanding every component. She practiced emergency procedures until they became instinctive, knowing that her margin for error was smaller than her male colleagues. She also worked with sports psychologists to develop mental techniques for maintaining focus under pressure, understanding that psychological warfare was as much a part of her job as flying. Amanda's initial attempts to prove herself met with mixed results. Her technical knowledge was undeniable. She scored highest on written examinations and aircraft systems tests. Her flying skills were exceptional, with instructor evaluations consistently rating her performance as superior. But the harassment continued, with Thompson and his followers dismissing her achievements as products of lowered standards or special treatment. The breaking point came during a training exercise when Amanda executed a particularly challenging maneuver flawlessly, only to have Thompson announce over the radio that she'd gotten lucky. Twice, the comment was heard by the entire squadron, undermining her achievement and reinforcing the narrative that she was unqualified for her position. For the first time since arriving at Nellis, Amanda felt her confidence beginning to crack. But sometimes the greatest tests come not from training scenarios or performance evaluations, but from real emergencies where the only things that matter are skill, courage, and the willingness to risk everything for people who may never know your name. The harassment intensified as Amanda's flying skills became undeniable. Unable to attack her technical competence, her tormentors focused on her appearance and gender, suggesting that her success was due to political correctness rather than merit. Thompson began assigning her the most dangerous demonstration routines, hoping she would either fail or request easier assignments that would confirm his beliefs about her limitations. The psychological warfare escalated when other pilots began questioning her decisions in front of junior personnel, undermining her authority and creating doubts about her leadership capabilities. They would accidentally schedule conflicting meetings during her briefings, force her to repeat instructions multiple times, and generally create an atmosphere where her competence was constantly questioned. The third phase brought professional sabotage. Equipment malfunctions became suspiciously common during her flights, forcing her to deal with additional stress while performing already dangerous maneuvers. Flight schedules were changed without notice, leaving her unprepared for demonstrations. The cumulative effect was designed to create a pattern of problems that could be blamed on her inexperience or inability to handle pressure. The situation attracted attention from higher command levels, but the scrutiny created additional pressure rather than relief. Some officers questioned whether the Thunderbirds were ready for female integration, using Amanda's struggles as evidence that standards might need adjustment. Others defended her right to be there, while privately doubting her ability to succeed under such hostile conditions. Media attention added another layer of complexity. Aviation journalists began following Amanda's career, turning her personal struggle into a public symbol of women's advancement in military aviation. The weight of representation was crushing. She wasn't just trying to be a successful pilot, she was trying to prove that all women could serve in combat aviation roles. Under relentless pressure, Amanda developed mental toughness that went beyond physical skill. She learned to compartmentalize harassment, treating it as just another challenge to overcome rather than a personal attack. Her engineering background helped her analyze problems systematically, finding solutions that others missed because they were focused on conventional approaches. Most importantly, Amanda developed an understanding of aircraft systems that bordered on intuitive. She could sense problems before instruments detected them, feel changes in aircraft behavior that others missed, and make split-second decisions based on incomplete information. This deep connection with her aircraft would prove crucial when mechanical systems failed and only human skill could prevent disaster. As the annual air show at Edwards Air Force Base approached, tension between Amanda and her colleagues reached dangerous levels. Thompson's harassment was affecting unit cohesion, and some officers were beginning to question whether her presence was worth the disruption. Amanda could feel her position becoming increasingly precarious, her dream of military aviation slipping away under the weight of institutional resistance. But on the day of the Edwards Air Force Base Air Show, with 50,000 spectators watching and her career hanging in the balance, Amanda was about to face a test that would forever change how the world saw her. The engine failure occurred at the worst possible moment halfway through Amanda's solo demonstration routine. With her F-16 directly over the packed grandstands at Edwards Air Force Base, what began as a routine maneuver became a catastrophic emergency in seconds as the aircraft's engine exploded, sending the fighter into an uncontrolled spin at 8,000 feet. The sound of the explosion echoed across the airfield, followed by the terrifying sight of a 16,000-pound aircraft tumbling toward the crowd below. Standard protocol was clear immediate ejection to save the pilot's life. The aircraft was expendable. The pilot was not. But as Amanda fought against the G-forces that were crushing her into her seat, she saw something that changed everything Her trajectory would send the crippled fighter directly into the grandstands where 200 people, including dozens of children, were watching the demonstration. Ejecting would save her life, but guarantee theirs would be lost. The radio crackled with urgent commands from her male colleagues. "Pixie, eject, eject now." But Amanda's analytical mind was already calculating wind speed, trajectory, and crowd density while fighting G-forces that should have rendered her unconscious. Her smaller frame, previously mocked as a weakness, allowed her to maintain consciousness longer than a larger pilot could have, giving her precious seconds to assess the situation. Trapped in a spinning aircraft with seconds to live, Amanda faced a choice that would define not just her own fate, but the fate of everyone below. She could follow protocol, eject safely, and watch helplessly as her aircraft killed innocent people. Or she could attempt something that aviation experts would later call impossible, manually controlling an uncontrollable aircraft to steer it away from the crowd. The decision required her to reject every instinct for self-preservation and every piece of training that prioritized pilot survival above all else. She was choosing to risk certain death for people who had never shown her respect, colleagues who had questioned her right to be there, and strangers who didn't even know her name. But Amanda's moral compass pointed in only one direction, toward the protection of innocent life, regardless of personal cost. The internal struggle was brief but intense. Her training screamed at her to eject. Her survival instincts demanded escape. But her conscience wouldn't allow her to abandon the people below. In that moment, Amanda understood that true courage wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about doing what was right when everyone else had given up hope. Amanda's decision to stay with the aircraft marked the moment when she stopped being a victim of circumstances and became their master, fighting against G-forces that would have incapacitated most pilots. She used her smaller size and superior conditioning to maintain consciousness while manually adjusting the aircraft's angle. Every movement was agony, every decision potentially fatal. But she pressed on with the determination of someone who had found her true purpose. Her engineering background became crucial as she calculated the physics of her situation in real time. She understood that her aircraft's trajectory could be altered through precise control inputs, even without engine power. Her deep knowledge of F-16 systems allowed her to coax performance from a dying aircraft that shouldn't have been possible. But understanding what needed to be done and actually doing it were two different things. And Amanda had less than 30 seconds to pull off a maneuver that would either save 200 lives or add her own to the casualty count. With her aircraft in an uncontrolled spin and rapidly losing altitude, Amanda had no time for conventional preparation. Every second counted, every decision was potentially fatal, and she had to rely on instincts honed by thousands of hours of flight training. Her hands moved across the controls with practiced precision, even as G-forces tried to crush her into unconsciousness. She quickly assessed her options. The aircraft was too damaged for a normal landing, too close to the crowd for a safe crash, and too low for a successful ejection that would clear the wreckage from the grandstands. The only possibility was a dead-stick landing on the narrow taxiway adjacent to the main runway, a maneuver that would require perfect timing, extraordinary skill, and incredible luck. As Amanda fought to control the spinning aircraft, Her male colleagues watched in horror from their own cockpits, unable to help and certain they were witnessing her death. Major Thompson, who had spent months mocking her abilities, found himself praying for the success of the woman he had tried to destroy. The crowd below remained unaware of the drama unfolding above them, their upturned faces reflecting excitement rather than terror. The aircraft's spin was gradually slowing under Amanda's control inputs, but she was running out of altitude fast, at 3,000 feet. She managed to level the wings momentarily at 2,000 feet. She had the aircraft pointed away from the crowd at 1,000 feet. She was lined up with the taxiway but coming in too fast and too steep for a survivable landing. The final approach was a masterpiece of aviation skill under impossible conditions. Amanda used every technique she'd ever learned, every instinct she'd developed, and every ounce of strength she possessed to guide the crippled F-16 toward the narrow taxiway. The aircraft was barely responding to her inputs, the controls sluggish and unpredictable, but she coaxed performance from systems that should have failed completely. At 500 feet, she realized the landing would be survivable, but barely. The aircraft was coming in too fast, but she had no choice. Any attempt to circle around would bring her back over the crowd. She committed to the approach, knowing that she had one chance to get it right. The margin for error was measured in feet. The consequences of failure measured in lives. The touchdown was violent but controlled. Amanda's F-16 hit the taxiway at 180 miles per hour, far faster than any normal landing, but slow enough to avoid immediate disintegration. The aircraft bounced, skidded, and began to break apart, but it stayed on the narrow strip of concrete and away from the crowd. Sparks flew as metal scraped against pavement, and fuel began leaking from ruptured tanks. With the aircraft sliding to a stop and flames beginning to engulf the wreckage, Amanda had seconds to escape before the fuel exploded. Her ejection seat had been damaged in the crash, forcing her to manually release her harness and climb out of the cockpit. She hit the ground hard, breaking 3 ribs and suffering a concussion. But she was alive, and the crowd was safe. The explosion came exactly as predicted, a massive fireball that consumed the aircraft and sent debris flying in all directions. But the wreckage was far from the grandstands, and every single person in the crowd was unharmed. Amanda's impossible landing had saved 200 lives, including the families of the men who had spent months questioning her right to be there. The immediate response was chaos mixed with amazement. Emergency crews rushed to Amanda's aid while spectators tried to understand what they had just witnessed. The other Thunderbird pilots, who had been certain they were watching her die, found themselves struggling to comprehend the feat of aviation skill they had just observed. Major Thompson, watching the crash footage on replay, broke down in tears as he realized the magnitude of what had just occurred. The woman he had mocked as a pretty flight attendant had just performed the most skilled emergency landing in military aviation history, saving lives that included his own family members in the stands. But the real impact of Amanda's heroic landing was just beginning to unfold. As the aviation community and the world at large began to understand what they had witnessed, the investigation into Amanda's emergency landing revealed the full scope of her achievement. Flight data recorders showed she had maintained control of an uncontrollable aircraft for 47 seconds, an eternity in aviation emergencies. Computer simulations confirmed that her split-second decisions had been not just correct, but optimal, given the circumstances. The Federal Aviation Administration called it the most skilled emergency landing in military aviation history. Major Thompson's public apology was broadcast across military networks, a humbling acknowledgment of his own prejudice and the courage of the woman he had tried to destroy. He requested transfer to a different unit, unable to face the pilot whose heroism had exposed his own moral failings. The other pilots who had participated in the harassment found themselves studying Amanda's techniques, realizing they had been in the presence of a legend. Amanda's landing became a watershed moment for women in military aviation. The incident forced a reevaluation of assumptions about gender, capability, and what constituted warrior strength. Her smaller stature, previously seen as a disadvantage, was now recognized as having provided crucial advantages in high-G situations. Training programs across all branches began incorporating her techniques and decision-making processes. The story spread throughout the aviation community and beyond, becoming a powerful example of how prejudice could blind people to extraordinary capability. Flight schools began using Amanda's emergency landing as a case study in crisis management, decision-making under pressure, and the importance of maintaining aircraft control regardless of circumstances. Amanda's promotion to major and her appointment as the first female leader of the Thunderbirds represented more than personal achievement. It was a transformation of military culture itself. Under her leadership, the unit's culture shifted from toxic masculinity to mutual respect, with performance and character becoming the only measures of worth. The men who had once mocked her appearance and questioned her capabilities now spoke of her with reverence. They had witnessed something that transcended gender, size, or any other superficial characteristic. They had seen pure courage in action, the willingness to sacrifice everything for strangers who might never know her name. Today, Amanda Foster's emergency landing is taught at every flight school as a master class in crisis management and moral courage. A statue at Edwards Air Force Base shows her F-16 in its final approach, with the inscription, "Courage has no gender. Heroism has no size." When lives are on the line, the smallest hands can carry the greatest responsibility. Her story became a powerful reminder that true strength has nothing to do with appearance, gender, or the opinions of others. The woman mocked for being too pretty to be a warrior had proven that real courage isn't about looking tough. It's about making the impossible choice when everyone else has given up hope. The lesson resonates far beyond military aviation. Never underestimate someone based on their appearance, their gender, or their size. You might be looking at the hero who will sacrifice everything to save people who never believed in them. Because when death is seconds away and hope seems lost, the person who saves you might be the one you least expected, the one whose courage was always there, waiting for the moment when it mattered most. The men who once called her Pixie now call her Legend, and they understand that true heroism isn't about proving others wrong. It's about doing what's right when the stakes are highest and the odds are impossible. Amanda Foster didn't just land a crippled fighter jet. She landed a blow against prejudice that will echo through military aviation for generations to come.